This is the voice of the moderate. In this video, I'm going to talk about this bill that has been introduced in Congress, dubbed H.R. 127. So this bill is a very fascinating one, largely because I see it as one of the most aggressive attempts by anti-gun lawmakers to take away your Second Amendment right. So to go over the provisions real quick. So one of the first ones is that it will create a national firearms registry that anyone, including those within every branch of law enforcement and even the military, can access. Essentially, this forces people to register their firearms in a database that anyone within the government can access and look at whenever the need may arise. The second provision is that this registry will require everyone to tell the government exactly where their firearms are located. So not just, oh, it's located in their house, they have to tell them exactly where in their house it's located. And the third one is that under this bill, anyone who wants to own a firearm or purchase one must have a license to do so. And anyone who applies for this license must take a mandatory psychological evaluation. And to make matters worse, as I think the fifth provision, one would need to pay at least $800 for firearm insurance. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that really means, but basically you have to pay to have this license. And another provision is that it would enact extreme ammunition restrictions. Basically, nothing. You can't own a magazine that goes over a 10-round capacity. You know, if you want an AR-15, you can't have more than 10 rounds. You can't use it for pretty much anything. It basically reduces it to a bolt action, just without without having to pull a bolt. And as you know, the final provision, this bill lays out some of the penalties for going against this potential new law. Essentially, any violators could expect up to 40 years in prison and up to a $150,000 fine. So for people like me, pro-gun, this is basically a nightmare scenario, a nightmare law, because it basically forces anyone who wants to have a gun to register themselves in some kind of government database. More than that, it strictly monitors what you do with your gun, and more importantly, it forces you to pay for that gun. So you're not just paying for the gun itself, but you're also paying to own it. And I believe it was somewhere else in this bill that basically, in order to maintain this license, you had to pay like $200 a year. So it basically, what the bill is doing is not banning, Americans from having these type weapons, but what it's doing is it's making it almost insanely difficult for an American to own this type weapon. And this is just utterly ridiculous because, um, if you know anything about the gun debate going on, there are multiple reasons to why, a gun bill here in the United States that would ban weapons, or ban firearms. You know how that wouldn't really work. How if there was any attempt to confiscate guns because they're banned, how that would go here in the States, and it wouldn't go well. And even if it succeeded somehow, it wouldn't happen without bloodshed. That's for sure. So the thing about this bill, and my reaction to it is, it's not surprising that this bill got introduced once the Democrats took control of the Senate and the presidency. What is concerning about it is that, again, this is yet another bill trying to limit what you can do with, limit your ability to own a firearm. But that, it's very possible somewhere down the road that this bill could come to pass. If support for, the Second Amendment and, gun rights continues to decline in the way it has, then we could the chance that these type bills could get passed, grows. Now, I obviously don't think that this bill is going to pass. There's just simply too much, opposition to it. But I don't think that it's impossible, especially in the future, for this bill to pass. Especially if, even more progressive Congress was somehow elected. What do I think we can do about stuff like this? There's not much we can really do. We just have to continue to, show and prove that, guns, you know, in American society are not not the reason for, the suicides we see and the, the violence we see. Because one of the biggest cons of a bill like this is that, criminals are not going to, obey these type of laws. By definition, they're not going to obey them. They're not going to respect them. More so, criminals are going to find their own way. If it suddenly becomes more difficult for criminals to buy firearms, then all that's going to do is create a black market, which doesn't really solve anything and puts us back at square one. More so, if, the fewer people within the country that are armed and, able to protect their properties, what's going to happen is it's going to make, households, businesses, etc., more open to, some sort of violent act, burglaries, robberies, mass shootings, etc. And I don't need to go over, the list of times that guns actually successfully stop shootings. So, all this to say, again, I don't think a bill like this is going to pass. Has barely received much attention, but I think we do need to draw attention to these type things and highlight attempts to take away the Second Amendment right that every American has. And whether you're pro-gun or you're anti-gun, you need to know that, need to know the truth that, it's not the gun, it's the person. And what we need to be doing as a people is just accept that people are going to do it. You can try to do something to minimalize shootings and unfortunate situations, but you can't outright stop it, especially not by disarming, the law-abiding citizens. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my take on it. I guess I'll leave it with that. This is the Clear and Present Prepper, signing out.